As a kid, I remember seeing female wrestlers such as Sable, Luna, Jacqueline, Sunny, and Chyna in the WWF. Then there was Ivory, Terry Reynolds, Tori, Deborah, Lita, Trish Stratus, and Molly Holly. They all played a role in the company, be it a manager or a wrestler. Fast forward a few years later, and you add women such as Victoria, Mickie James, Stacy Keibler, Tori Wilson, Gail Kim, Candice Michelle, and Beth Phoenix to the mix. This new crop of women were for the most part better wrestlers than the women before them. As the years went by, women's wrestling grew, not just in the WWE, but in other promotions such as TNA. I enjoyed what they had to offer. There was some great storylines, like Mickie James stalking Trish Stratus. I remember their WrestleMania match to this day. It wasn't about being the best or just about the women's title. It was about an obsessed fan in Mickie James who once idolized Trish Stratus to eventually wanting to ruin Trish and surpass her, turning her love into hatred. However, now things are a little different. As we see in WWE and other wrestling companies, women's wrestling has had more focus on it, especially in WWE. Personally, I didn't mind it at first, but it quickly grew tiresome. I'll do my best to explain why. After the women over at NXT got people talking, the women's division got an upgrade. From having 3-minute matches for the butterfly belt, nowadays we have 2 singles titles and tag titles dedicated to the women. But is it necessary? I say this because if you ask yourself what teams are there to warrant tag titles, you won't be able to come up with many. And makeshift tag teams are not the answer. There really isn't a tag division to speak of. Then if you look at the women's division on both Raw and SmackDown, how many of those women are legit contenders or even believable as champions? To me, the tag titles was a mistake. The women's roster is thin as it is. The tag titles just come across as a cheap PR stunt to get good press or for WWE to increase their ESG score. Regardless of the reason behind it, the women's tag division is just a joke and those tag titles have little to no meaning. Imagine 2 overrated broads walking out because they want to be used better in an obviously underdeveloped tag division. Oh wait. When it comes down to the wrestling aspect, sure it has gotten better, but I refuse to pretend it can compete with men's wrestling, and I sure as hell won't say it's superior to men's wrestling. The believability is not there, the intensity is not there, and the psychology is not there either. Now the storylines are a mixed bag for me. I get that women are taken more serious nowadays, which is a good thing, but doesn't it seem like most of these storylines usually involves the champ and the challenger making a case to see who is the best? When was the last time a rivalry was just personal? Does anyone remember the feud between Tori Wilson and Dawn Marie? This also applies to the men. The storylines are fairly safe with them as well. Not every female in wrestling has to be a wrestler in order to break barriers. Look at women like Sensational Sherry or Queen Sharmell. They were memorable characters that didn't have to put themselves through tables or poured buckets of blood to get noticed. Better yet, look at Vicky Guerrero. I'm sure at the time, none of us thought she would have had the career that she had. An underrated on-screen character in my opinion. Vicky was able to generate so much heat. The storyline she had, where she was with Rey Mysterio, Edge, Undertaker, and Dolph Ziggler, were great. And she didn't have to be a 10-time women's champion to have such a memorable career. Now, not every storyline with the women has to involve a title or who can out-wrestle who. Let's take Bray Wyatt for example. His character is not based on being the best wrestler in the world. His motivations are not driven by championships. He doesn't need a championship to prove how good he is. He's able to develop characters that draws our attention. These one-layered storylines could be why ultimately women's wrestling as a whole is not as big of a draw as many want you to believe. If you don't believe me, just look at that Evolution pay-per-view WWE had years ago. It's not hard to see why there hasn't been another one since. Even the NWA tried an all-women's pay-per-view and it did poorly. While the NWA is no WWE, the vocal social media crowd seems to not care enough to support something that they claim is in such high demand. But the fact is, an all-women's pay-per-view is not profitable. So if WWE or Billy Corgan at NWA doesn't want to lose money on another show that will go nowhere, why should they bother? I don't blame them for not wanting to waste money on events like that. Let one of these confident women put their own money into an all-women's event, but we know that won't happen. Let's look at NXT. Currently, Mandy Rose is the NXT Women's Champion. Been champion for a while now. Her, along with Toxic Attraction, have been major players in NXT. And do you want to know why? Because they are three attractive women that make people want to watch. Don't get it twisted, NXT's viewership doesn't come close to Raw and SmackDown, but Toxic Attraction helps boost NXT's viewership. And it's not because of Toxic Attraction's amazing work rate, but rather for what they do very well. They look and act the part. All three of those women look like stars. They carry themselves with high regard, but on top of all that, they can talk. Toxic Attraction oozes with charisma. You can tell they believe in what they are saying. Their dedication to the gimmick shows. And this is all not to say that they haven't improved in the ring. They most certainly have. While they aren't the best in-ring talent, they don't have to be. You see, at the end of the day, this is sports entertainment. AEW or any other company can claim otherwise, but they are all sports entertainment companies. We watch wrestling to be entertained. We want to get invested in the product, and when you disregard storylines and characters, that's when people tune out. There's nothing wrong with women wrestlers wanting to be good in the ring, but they need to understand that having a character and an interesting look is just as important as applying a headlock or running the ropes. Because at this point, there should have been women that have surpassed someone like Trish Stratus when it comes to character. Because you can call yourself the man, pretend to be a man, or pretend you're not a man. Fact is, these women need to be interesting. Stop trying to compete with men's wrestling and lying to people about how it's all the same, because it's not, and it's been proven. Just like the men, you can be the work rate guy all day, but if you look generic, barely hit the gym, and can't cut a good promo to save your life, then you won't get far in the big leagues. Bingo halls and Twitter may tell you otherwise, but in places like WWE, where it really matters, that's where it counts. And that is where you have to have that it factor. This false narrative about women's wrestling needs to stop. Yes, they have a place in wrestling. It has its audience. But can we stop pretending it's on equal footing as men's wrestling? Because it's not. Listen to the silence during some of these matches. Look at how many of them can't wrestle. Hell, just look at AEW and their poor excuse of a women's division. Or take Damage Control in WWE, for example. They absolutely suck. You can hear a pin drop whenever they are on TV. I'm not asking for female wrestlers to strip naked or to not bother wrestling. Absolutely not. All I ask is to consider developing a character past wanting to be champion and being a work rate indie mark that rejects femininity because society wants to condition people to blur the lines between male and female. Women like Alundra Blaze and Luna took wrestling seriously, fought over the women's championship, but was able to get over with the audience. Those two deserve to be talked about more. You want to know what's empowering? Female wrestlers who are not afraid of being sexy and kicking ass. What's also empowering is female wrestlers who don't think if they look, act, and wrestle like men, they will be among the greats in history. Because women such as Alundra Blaze, Luna, Ivory, Victoria, Molly, Jacqueline, Michelle McCool, and Trish Stratus, along with many others, never had to resort to any of that to be some of the pioneers in women's wrestling.